So Chris, welcome to Gwinnett County Storybook Project. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, yes. I've been wanting to interview you now for a while, so this is very, very special to me,
Great.
whether you know that or not.
Well, thank you.
So first off, just tell me, what brought you to Gwinnett County?
So I initially moved to Atlanta 28 years ago now, and I came here to go to Clark Atlanta University. I'm originally from Chicago, returned to Chicago after graduate school, braved a few winters, and then I came back. And when we came back, I left having no kids. I came back having a child and a half because the other one was on the way. And so after having two kids, we initially settled in Lithonia, but as the kids were school-aged, we moved to Gwinnett County for better schools. And also, we wanted a house that was spacious and had a nice-sized yard to put a playground in. And that was, of course, before I realized I have to actually cut the grass and maintain the yard. But initially, that's what brought us to Gwinnett County.
Very good. So what part of the county do you live in?
So right now, we live in Snellville,
Okay.
really at the tip of South Gwinnett. We're about 2 miles from an intersection where Rockdale, DeKalb, and Gwinnett County all touch.
Interesting,
So
okay.
in the southern tip of Gwinnett County.
So you said that you primarily moved to Gwinnett for the schools. Why did you choose that area?
Well, at the time, I worked in Tucker, and so my office was directly off of Brockett Road and Highway 78. And so I was trying to get as close to work as possible, and where we ended up moving was exactly 13 miles from our office.
Oh, wow.
And so it was a perfect location for me, mainly because I didn't want to be in the car that long, but also wanted to be close to the schools so we can get back and forth. And at that time, Snellville, this was 16 years ago, Snellville was kind of undergoing a surge in the growth. So there was plenty of housing to choose from, and the prices were really good.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, is the motto, everybody's somebody in Snellville?
That's correct. Everybody is somebody in Snellville.
I love that.
Yeah.
But how beautiful is that, though? Because it really is true.
Yeah, it is. Snellville was a very nice community. It was, I mean, it's grown quite a bit since we've lived there, a tremendous amount of growth. I mean, I could throw a rock and hit probably 3 new subdivisions they're all less than a mile from our house. And you certainly feel it when you get on the road in the morning. All the cars from the new subdivisions pouring on.
Oh yes, it's actually amazing. Even in the 10 years I've been here, I've really just noticed the growth, and certainly all the cars on the road. So if you had to describe Gwinnett County in one word, what would that be?
Vibrant.
Why?
Well, I think it's vibrant. So I think if it was one thing that I like most about Gwinnett, I couldn't pick one thing, but I'd say there's a lot of parks. And so the green space, the accessibility to get to green space is really great. So it doesn't matter what side of town you live on, there are plenty of parks. And so with the parks, I think it just makes you want to be outside. We live close to Yellow River, so there's Yellow River Park, but not far from us, there's Lenore Church, there's Briscoe Field. And so within less than 10 minutes, I can get to 3 different parks in less than 10 minutes. A mountain bike, and so actually behind where I live is the mountain bike trail, which was also used for the Olympics in 1996. And so I actually found that by accident because my dog ran off one day.
Oh,
found that trail was back there.
one good thing about a dog running away, you find new things.
And so, I think having access to all of those parks really makes it great, particularly in the summertime when you want to be outside. And so that's one of the great things that I've really loved about living there.
So you love the parks. What else keeps you in Gwinnett County? Why do you stay here when you could go anywhere else?
Yeah, well, I think aside from the parks, the schools have been great. I've got 2 kids that have now graduated high school in Gwinnett. A third one soon to graduate, and a 4th one who he's a 7th grader at Coleman Middle School in downtown Duluth. And so that's one reason to stay. I mean, I think we've been really pleased with the education offerings, and so that's one reason. But the other reason, because I see myself, we spend a lot of weekends where we don't really go into town, because you could find just about everything you want in Gwinnett. And so, for example, my son plays soccer for UFA. He played at Norcross, and now he plays up in South Forsyth team. But the field, so we often practiced, for years we practiced at Pinckneyville Park and the center, which is not far from downtown Norcross. And so when he was practicing, I would go spend a lot of time in downtown Norcross. And so the restaurant offerings are really great in downtown Norcross. I spent hours and hours every day at 45 South Coffee Shop in downtown Norcross.
Oh, I love that place.
I do too.
Yes.
And so it really grows on you. And this just the small town feel of being in that downtown area is really cool. Thrasher Park is a very small, intimate park down there, which I would also go spend time and just do some reading. And so I can't really think of another place where you have, one, the access to that many parks, but also you get a good mix of culture and the price. So you take the same setting of downtown Norcross and move into inside the perimeter, and the cost goes up tremendously.
Yes,
so for the
indeed.
same size, for the same offerings, it goes up tremendously, and you still don't have the access to the same amenities. Not to mention the quality of the schools.
And traffic's worse.
And yeah, and traffic's kind of a universal Atlanta problem, but yeah, it does get worse in some pockets.
So you have your 4 children, and you're a new granddaddy.
Yes.
By about a year.
Yeah, almost. So he'll be a year in this summer in June.
Is he in Gwinnett?
Yeah, well, actually, they're just across the border in DeKalb County, but they are looking to buy a house, which will likely be in Gwinnett County.
Oh, now, are they moving to Gwinnett for the same reasons you did? Schools, parks?
They're moving to Gwinnett because of price.
Ah, I gotcha.
It's something that they can afford.
Okay, very good. So I guess if I was sitting here with your 4 kids, what would they say about Gwinnett, if you could even, think about that?
So I think they have all appreciated their education. They've all appreciated that, their friends, the ability to be able to get places pretty quickly. I mean, where we live is, as I mentioned, it's at the southern tip of the county, but we're still not that far from restaurants. So you can get up to Highway 78 pretty quickly, and then further down to the shops at Web Gin. And so you have a lot of restaurant offerings and shopping for them. Besides that, I think they've become kind of accustomed to utilizing the parks out there. When they were younger, we would go and ride bikes around the park, or they would skateboard, not skateboarding. But I think they've come accustomed to just living out there. And then there's a space factor, because if you move in town, you're not likely going to have a yard, or at least not at the same price points. Right, it's going to be a lot smaller. So they've gotten used to having a yard. And I think they're suburban kids, so they've grown up kind of accustomed to the lifestyle we've had there.
That's great. So I know that you work in Midtown. And you get in your car, and I know you have to drop children off in the morning, you drive down to Midtown. So at the end of the day, when you're driving home back to your community, to Gwinnett County, what goes through your head? Are you happy to get home? Are you like over the traffic and ready just to sit out on your couch?
Yeah. So I have an unusual commute. And so, I mentioned I live at the southern tip of Gwinnett, but my youngest goes to school in downtown Duluth, and then I work in Midtown. And so I have about a 4-hour daily commute because of it's an hour out here, an hour to get in town, and then back to get him, and then back home, and then back out for soccer practice. If I add that all up, it's actually closer to 5 hours.
Oh my goodness.
But, so yeah, when I get home, it's like exhale, take off your shoes and put your feet up. But I always look forward to getting home and just getting out of the car. But honestly, with podcast and I mean, I have a lot of car entertainment, so to speak. So I'm very well informed on current events, listening to the news and podcasts. But I think it's always great to come home, and it's really like a contrast to being in Midtown. So in Midtown, Midtown's a great community, but it's very busy. The density it's a high density area. And so you leave that and go to Snellville, where we live, and it's very quiet. There are always deer, so you have a lot of wildlife, which is tranquil. And so it's a great way to top off a day, to come home and you're away from all the lights and the traffic and the crowd, and it's a lot more comfortable and quiet. So it's a great way to start and finish the day.
Wonder how that'll feel when you're an empty nester.
Yeah, I haven't thought about that, but that's a good question. So we got a little while though. We still have, we still have a rising 8th grader, so he'll be around for a while. But yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I definitely could promise you, I do not want to have a yard to maintain. And so that's the one thing I get around.
Leaves and grass.
Yes, and we've actually started
trees.
looking. We're looking to move. Hopefully, but before the school year starts again, to move. He has a permissive transfer to attend Coleman, but to move closer, so we're in the district, so I don't have to make that. That'll cut out, that leg of our drive every day.
Oh, that would be great.
To be in Duluth, and preferably in a townhouse, so there is not yard to take care of. The downside, of course, is that I have to walk the dog, because right now we have a fenced-in yard. I just let him out and he runs around and chases the neighbor's cat, who's on the other side of the fence. But if we move, that would be the only downside. But I'm looking forward to downsizing some. It won't be a huge downsizing, but giving up the yard, I'm ready to do.
Well, maybe your dog will get out and you'll discover something new.
Yeah.
Like the trail you did now.
Right, possibly.
So I know that you work in academia, and so obviously education is very, very important to you. And so when you chose, I know you chose Gwinnett County for its schools, and then you described why you chose the specific area. What do you think now about the schools? Are you still as pleased with them as you were back then? What do you think the school system will look like in maybe 4 years when your youngest graduates? Maybe in 10 years? I mean, what are your thoughts about that from someone in academia?
That's a great question. So I think the schools are going through a shift, and it's the same shift that the nation's going through, and that is as we become a more diverse population, as we get more international students and families that move in our communities, you have a larger population of students who don't speak English as their primary language. Right. And so English as a second language is real key, and it's important that schools have the appropriate resources so that those children could learn at the same pace that those students who speak English as their primary language do. And so certainly Gwinnett has been, because Gwinnett, it has such a diverse multicultural population, that's one of the great things about the county, but it's also one of the challenges in the schools. Right. Because I think it's really hard to prepare for that influx of students, and it takes, depending on the age, it can take up to 3 years to really catch those students up academically, particularly if they have to polish up on their English skills. Right. And so that's really the big challenge is how do you continue to put forth a challenging curriculum for those students who are ready to move forward, at the same time not leaving any of the students who may have some other challenges ahead. So that's one of the big challenges, and I think over the next 10 years, the county's going to continue to diversify, and mainly, I think, again, because of, one, the county's very large, two, because of the diverse housing communities you have. So you have communities priced from, in every price point, from starter homes up to the mega mansions that cost multiple millions of dollars. So you have this wide range of residents, and you have to be able to have a curriculum that can engage all of those kids. And so I think right now, up until this point, the county has done a really great job. I mean, its offerings are very diverse. You have the charter schools, Coleman, one of which I mentioned. You have Gwinnett School of Math, Science, and Technology, which provide the academic rigor that students need that are looking at going particularly into STEM fields. So what the next 10 years is going to need is so that the same academic rigor that are in schools such as that could be accessible to more of the population. So particularly in areas where there are more low-income students. So along, kind of along the Beaufort Highway corridor, and so the districts that would catch students that come off of those corridors and the districts that catch students from lower income areas, they're going to be faced with having to do more with less because, so you know, educational resources and funding is not going up. And the funding formula, the state funding formula for education provides a formula where every student gets the same allocation. So, and each county has their own way of allocating money. But generally speaking, every student gets the same allocation. So it costs more to educate a student who doesn't speak English as a first language, and it costs more to educate a student who's in poverty. But the formula doesn't account for that. And so you have Title I schools that get additional resources because they're Title I schools, but that still doesn't make up for the gap. When you have households that cannot pay for supplemental tutoring, that cannot pay for summer programs, and who may not have anyone in the house who has attended college or university. So when you have first-generation college students, it costs more to get them to that point.
Right.
And the funding formulas in education don't really account for that. And so that's going to be the great challenge for Gwinnett. It's a challenge universally for schools, but that's going to be a big challenge at Gwinnett, particularly because they have such a large school system. And so I would hope, and I would imagine that moving forward, there will be more opportunities for the business community to get engaged, because that's really where the gap, because public dollars can only go so far. They can only be stretched so far. And so where you see in communities that are more affluent, you have the business community, aside from the parents who could also put money in, you have the business community that steps in and they supplement schools with resources. And so I think that's going to be the real opportunity for Gwinnett County moving forward, to tap into the business community and some of the other leadership to be able to put forth really innovative programs in schools so that the kids that are in lower income communities could still have the same access to equipment.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. Education is certainly a challenge for the nation, but definitely our region. And I read recently that our legislature is considering revising the funding formula. Have you also read the same thing?
Yeah.
So they're going to take into account the low income and then.
Right.
Okay, fantastic. I'm
Yeah,
glad
and
to
so
hear
that's going to happen. I still think it's the need always outweighs the resources. So even if they do change
always
it,
will.
Yeah, and it always will. Even if they do change the formula, that will help some. And I'm sure that the data will show that increase will help some of those kids. But it's still going to be imperative that the business community steps in and actually provides some resources to close the gap. And it's really important for the business community because these are your next generation of leaders. These are your employees. And so it's important that we are creating a good pipeline to keep both the county and the region vibrant.
I do a lot of work serving almost as a bridge between the nonprofit and the corporate and business community. And that is one thing I've uncovered recently, is that members of the business and corporate community do want to plug in, but it almost becomes an issue of access to them. You know, how do I plug in? Where do I plug in? How can I have the most impact with the dollars that we're able to allocate? So I really do appreciate you lifting that up. If you had to give any guidance to people in the corporate and business community in Gwinnett County, maybe not necessarily around education, but other issue areas, what would you say to them about, hey, it's time for you to take that corporate social responsibility to the next level at your organization?
Well, I think for the business community, and I understand that people are busy, and what I have found happens is, if you sit and talk with someone in any leadership role, they are concerned about these issues. And they want to help and they want to do something. But where the disconnect, I think, has been is it's typically not any one person's responsibility. The people that you often have access to or you talk to, they may have enough money to fund a program. And funding a program is great, and that is certainly a resource and a tool to contribute to solving a problem. But I think the real big opportunity is to leverage those resources. And so I'll use this example. So through the chambers convene monthly meetings.
The Metro Chamber or Gwinnett?
Both.
Both, okay.
But I'll use just the Gwinnett Chamber.
Okay.
And so they convene monthly meetings where you get, a good diverse population of companies and leadership together. If through that vehicle, they take up an initiative, and so it could be whether it's education, whether it's kind of poverty writ large, whatever the issue is, whether it's access to transportation. But if they take up an issue and kind of set an agenda, priorities of things they want to address with that, and then engage each of those business leaders to contribute whatever they feel comfortable contributing. I don't know if you could set it at $10,000, $20,000, whatever, but whatever they feel comfortable contributing, and they set a goal of raising funds, similar to when you go into areas and there's a thermometer and they're trying to raise money to
the capital campaign model, yes.
Right. And so if they do a capital campaign to focus on social issues, I think that's one area that if I were talking to a group of business leaders, I would encourage them to do is pick an area. And since we're talking about education, I think education would be a good one, is to do a capital campaign, and it's specifically to help supplement Title I schools. So that would be a good marker, a benchmark for them to aim. We'll contribute $100,000 or whatever the dollar amount is.
Right.
And that's one. And you do this because not out of altruism, but because it is an economic imperative. And if you do not address them, then these again are your future employees, your future leaders. Not only that, but poverty is a drain on the economy, and I would even argue it could undermine democracy, because democracy is predicated on everyone being able to participate. And so if you're poor and you don't have access to certain things, then you cannot fully participate. And so it does good for your business if you are able to help support people patron your business or other businesses, because it puts more money into the economy. And so that would be the one thing I think I would implore business leaders to take a look at. And particularly when it relates to kids, because kids can be shaped and molded, and certainly everyone has the ability to learn. Not that adults can't, but I think with kids, it's actually, you could easily implement something because they're occupied in school 5 days a week. And so there's a good touch point, and where you could have probably a greater impact because you have this captive audience in this captive time slot, which is a school day, versus going into communities, which can be hit and miss. You can't really go door to door, knocking on people's doors to see if they want to participate in something, but you can use schools as kind of a point of engagement, both for the kids and the parents.
So I know you work a lot with youth, and youth are emerging leaders. What do you think about the youth that you've worked with in Gwinnett County? I mean, do you have a good feeling about how they're going to take all of this to the next level and ensure that there's prosperity and equity for all? What are your thoughts there?
So I think the youth in Gwinnett County are really, they're really outstanding. And so one thing that I think they, and this could be true of Gwinnett and some other metro counties, is they are in schools with very diverse populations. And so I think there becomes a certain comfort level with the other. And so all the students don't look the same. And so you're comfortable with having friends of different cultures.
You grew up with it.
Right, you grew up with it. Different cultures, different ethnicities. And so that's a real advantage, because as you learn about other cultures and you learn about other people's lifestyles, you have an appreciation for it. And it's something that right now, I think about my seventh grader. it's not really all that cognizant of. But as you get older and you reflect back, you realize this opportunity has made you a much better citizen.
Absolutely.
And so really what we need to be is better global citizens. And I think when you have the opportunity to engage with people of different races, different cultures, different socioeconomic backgrounds, it makes you a better citizen because you realize some of the challenges that that students and people have. And so that's been one of the things that's been really impressive. The other is, I think, the drive for success and to do well. And I would attribute that a lot to, one, the expectations. So I know we've been fortunate enough in the schools my kids have been into that there's an expectation that they will move forward and do well. And so I have motto I love to say, so it's often said that people are products of their environment, but I think a greater truth are people products of expectation. And so if expectations are low, you will rise to that low expectation, but if they're high, you'll rise to that one as well. And I think that's been a really great benefit of being here.
Well, those are certainly wise words from an academic and a community leader. So if you had to think about Gwinnett, let's say in 25 years, what do you think Gwinnett will be? You know, I mean, I think, kind of think broadly about that. What do you think it'll look like? We'll know it'll be diverse.
Yeah.
We hope and pray we solve our transportation and transit issues. What else? Do you have any other thoughts?
Well, I think Gwinnett has a great opportunity. So it's
to lead the nation is what I keep saying. It's a wonderful model.
It does. It has, because one, it's a very it's a large county. There's still a lot of undeveloped land in Gwinnett. So you drive any direction, you could come up on undeveloped land.
Cows.
Right. Cows,
Seriously.
deer running around.
You don't see that so much in Fulton and DeKalb.
That's right. That's right. And so it has a great opportunity for growth and to do it smart. So one of the challenges, my research background was in urban planning, and so as a researcher in urban planning, this is when I was working in Chicago. The inside running joke would be, if you want to show somebody how not to plan a city, send them examples of Atlanta. And so, and it's largely because of how Atlanta's set up. Atlanta has, Metro Atlanta, at its origin was 5 counties, then 10 counties, and now I think it's 23 counties, the metro area. And so each county has their own elected body, they have their own planning departments, and they don't necessarily collaborate and work together.
It's very unique.
Right, it is. Now, in counties like Gwinnett, or in the larger counties like Gwinnett, because it is such a large landmass, they have an opportunity to really work more strategically at connecting each part of the county. Now, I know putting in a transit system is far too costly. It's really hard to do after you've been built. You kind of have to put transit and build a city or county around it. But they do have a good opportunity to really be more strategic in how they connect each. If you divided the county into quadrants, to connect each quadrant of the county. So if they start looking at the county and thinking of it in terms of slicing it into 4 and thinking about how do you connect each one of those quadrants to each other, I think that would be really something that they're going to have to look at over the next 20, 25 years. Otherwise, people will just be locked in traffic. The other thing I think will happen is they'll look at where it makes sense to increase density. So years ago, maybe pre-recession or right on the cusp of recession, there was proposal to build high-rise condos right across from Gwinnett Place Mall, so right at the end of Pleasant Hill and 85, which it probably may have made sense at the time, and still could make sense. But if you do that, you have to add another transportation option, because just getting to 85 at that intersection at any time of rush hour is really challenging.
Any time of day, except for the middle of the night.
Right.
I'm up there a fair amount. It's challenging.
Yeah, it's challenging. And so when you look at those pockets, so there, even up in Beaufort, around the Mall of Georgia, there are going to be pockets where there's a lot of retail, a lot of commercial, a lot of amenities that you really need to be strategic in thinking about increasing the density and creating a zoning category by right, so that developers don't have to rezone to do it, which is a lengthy process and costly. If you create these pockets or plan unit development categories where they can go in and build these mixed-use communities, I think it's going to be key moving forward. And that's already happening. That's already happening in some areas of the county. But there's still going to be a transportation problem. And the challenge for the county is going to be working with the state, because a lot of these roads are state roads. And so the county really doesn't have a whole lot of impact on what funds are allocated or what decisions are made, because they're state roads.
Complex.
So it's a very complex problem to address. So there's going to be need to be more collaboration with both state DOT officials and the county officials, and so that's the transportation problem. The other issue, I think, is really, how could Gwinnett be effective at attracting more business, large employers, so that you create employment centers within the county. And so transportation kind of flows around employment centers. And so, Midtown's an employment center, Alpharetta's been an employment center. And so if you think about these areas that have large employment centers, they also have a couple things in common, with the exception of Alpharetta. They have access to transportation.
Right.
And so if you think of Midtown Buckhead, certainly the airport being a really large one, there's a public transportation option.
Absolutely.
Again, I know that you're not going to get transit out here. Maybe in 25 years you could, but not in the short term. And so that you really have to start looking at what alternatives can we use to move people from point A to point B without having single occupancy vehicles on the road. And as we continue to add communities, the only way you can address that is by, one, increasing the density to allow people to live in areas where there are job centers and restaurants and other amenities, so that you may have these huge surges of traffic in the morning and the evening, but then at certain points it shuts down. And as you mentioned, Pleasant Hill, at that intersection, it's always traffic. Well, if you build with the idea that we're building for the next 20 years, not for what we need right now, then you could address all of that.
So I did RLI back in 2016. So we had the data guys, Mike and Mike, from the ARC.
Mike C and Mike A.
Yes, it was the presenters. I don't remember which Mike said it, but the information they delivered to our group, which caused all of us to gasp, was that a child born today will never drive a car. What do you think about that?
I could definitely see that. I mean, there's advances in autonomous vehicles. The technology isn't quite there where we're at 100% autonomous, but so if there's the level 5, I think they, for scientists that research this, so we're maybe at level 2, and 5 would be completely autonomous. But that's quite true unless you, it's true if you can live, work, play in within a close proximity.
So everybody's really desiring that these days.
That's right, that's right. And so that's true. And I think for kids now, there's not really a desire to drive as much.
As my 17-year-old says.
Yes, they don't want to drive as much. And that's going to become, I think, a greater truth as areas are forced to really think strategically about how they grow. And so that you can't just plop single-family homes on quarter-acre lots in this isolated, kind of walled-off subdivision anymore, that you have to think about the transportation, the connectivity of the streets, not just within the subdivision, but around the subdivision, where the schools are, where the retail is, where the restaurants are. And if you can do that smart, then I think you could serve to be a destination where kids will want to return after they're of age to purchase or rent a place. Because right now,
and that's what we want.
That's
come
what
back
we
to
want.
Gwinnett.
We want people to come back.
Yes.
And if you have to come back and drive 20 to 30 minutes every time you leave the house, then while that's not a big problem for us, it is a big problem for the younger generation who largely don't really see themselves having to be in a car. Now, the part that I think Mike and Mike were addressing, autonomous vehicles are really, they're huge leaps and improvements in the technology and what's available. There's still challenges. There's some legal challenges, for example, who's at fault? If an accident occurs in an autonomous vehicle and someone is injured.
So I didn't think about that.
Yeah, who's at fault? And so And that will work itself out as these cases will become kind of commonplace. But there's also going to be an equity issue with that, because not everybody can afford, will be able to afford access to those type of vehicles.
Right.
And I think you're still going to have a situation where you're going to have to be really thoughtful about how you allow business and corporations to build and engage in the county. And what I mean by that is you tend to go in some pockets of the county and there's a lot of resources, while in other pockets, not so many, and they're isolated. Well, that actually hurts everybody, because if all the restaurants and all the amenities are in one particular area of the county, then the people that live in the other area of the county have to drive all the way through the county to get to those resources. And so traffic affects everybody. And so as you continue to attract business and continue to attract residents, you have to be really mindful in incentives that you, tools that Community Economic Development Department would have to attract businesses. And it's really beneficial. Again, it's beneficial to not just the immediate community, but it's beneficial to everybody in the county if everybody has access, because then that business does better when everybody can frequent there. That retailer, if they have better access, if people have better access to them, then they're able to do better, and they could also contribute back to the community as well.
Absolutely. So one idea that you have woven throughout our whole dialogue is around connectivity. And I know that you and I have to get off to a brunch meeting. So I want to talk a little bit, you brought up Beaufort Highway. Is that Beaufort Highway really is a connector between DeKalb County with ethnicities, and a lot of us go to Beaufort Highway for different restaurants. You can go and have Ethiopian and Korean and Chinese and Thai and Mexican and Peruvian. What do you love about Beaufort Highway? You love their food?
So actually, you stole my thunder. Just that. I mean, you could have anything on Beaufort Highway, and it really is like it's like a world enclave. You could just go down, like as you mentioned, and you could experience different cultures in one straight shot. But you know, talking about connectivity, Beaufort Highway is a really good example of where there's opportunity to make it even more vibrant. So at pockets of Beaufort Highway, depending on where you are, it's not very pedestrian friendly or cyclist friendly.
Working on that.
Yes.
We love Beaufort Highway. We're working.
So, and that's great. And that's great that's, but that is something that it shouldn't have taken this long to get to that point. I think when people finally realize, like, this is really unattainable. I mean, this is something that we have to address, because if you're on one side of the street, getting to the other side of the street is really dangerous.
Indeed.
And so that hurts everybody. And it's, again, with that foresight to think of what do we want to be in 10 or 20 years versus just building for right now. And I think I mentioned that joke when I was a researcher about show people what not to do, show them Atlanta. I think Atlanta had been in the mode of just addressing, and I speak of the Atlanta in the metro sense. Atlanta had been in the mode of really, let's just build. It was short-sighted. Let's just build to accommodate right now. And I don't know that the region, leaders in the region, certainly in the different counties and the city, really would have predicted that the region would have grown at this rate that it did, as fast as it did.
Pretty amazing, really.
It is. And so what you have is each little pocket kind of doing their own thing without consideration for the next pocket. And pocket you can define as maybe county. And so it has to be a more collaborative effort. And Beaufort Highway is a great example, because like you said, it cuts through. You start at one end and you're in Fulton, and you can ultimately end up, I guess you go all the way to Forsyth, just driving up Beaufort Highway. And so it's really important to make that a vibrant area where it's pedestrian accessible, It's cycle friendly because that would be great. Just hop on a bike and bike all the way down.
Wouldn't that be awesome?
Yeah, that would be great. And so
you can stop off and have
yeah,
a breakfast here,
eat,
lunch
keep biking,
here.
right? And so while you could try that, it's
You might
pretty
get killed.
dangerous. That's right. You might get killed. It's pretty dangerous. But I think that's really a great opportunity. And then to think about all the spurs and passages that you might connect off of Buford Highway, and even to have bus services that connect, and there is bus service, but to think about where those buses go off of that spine, that being the spine, and think about the communities off of that, and really taking a strategic look at what makes sense to develop, really high density areas off it. Because what surprises me is that to have a corridor like that and not have as many large and very dense developments, it's kind of a surprise, because I'm from Chicago, and so you go down Michigan Avenue in Chicago, it's very dense, and just off of Michigan Avenue, it's very dense. I remember not too long ago, next door, my sister for 20 plus years lived at 445 East Ohio Street, which is adjacent to Navy Pier, and her building was 60 stories. She stayed on the 36th floor.
Wow.
The building next door was 86 floors. And so every building around her had over 40 floors. And so you're talking about 1,000 units to the acre. There's not a zoning category in Metro Atlanta that allows for that density that I'm aware of. And so at a corridor like Buford Highway, I'm really surprised that nobody has thought to look at really having a large, there are some, but not as many as you would expect on a corridor like that.
Buford Highway, because I live right off of Buford Highway, I consider it the cultural gem of our region. And it really, to me, there's so much opportunity for it to really and be like this cultural connector as well. So I'm very excited about everything going on in Gwinnett and the region in general. But thank you, Chris, for our time today.
Hey,
I know we can jump and go to our brunch meeting and chat more, but thank you so much.
Hey,
I appreciate you
here.
here.
Thank you.
It has been wonderful.
Awesome.
Appreciate your time.
All right.